Hey guys, tonight we are going to strip away the Hollywood glamour of knights and damsels to uncover the gritty, slightly smelly reality of finding a soulmate in the Middle Ages. Picture yourself standing in a bustling market square, clutching a wilted flower, heart pounding in your chest, hoping that the cute blacksmith or the miller's daughter glances your way without grimacing at your teeth. Let's be real. With the plagues, the wars, and the questionable stew, you probably won't survive this, but at least the romance will be memorable. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment letting me know where in the world you are and what time it is. I love seeing who's drifting off with us. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step out of your timber-framed house and into the morning light. The air is cool, or at least the temperature is cool. The scent hanging in the air is warm, thick, and complicated. You are looking for love today, or perhaps just a meaningful glance across a crowded alleyway, but the first thing you have to navigate is the street itself. You look down at your feet. You're wearing simple leather turn shoes, thin-soled and practical, which is unfortunate because the ground beneath you is a treacherous slurry. It rained last night, and in a medieval town, rain doesn't just wash things away, it reactivates them. The mud here is an ambitious substance. It's a mix of earth, discarded vegetable peelings, straw, animal droppings, and the contents of chamber pots that were tossed out of upper windows with a shouted warning you hopefully heard in time. You take a tentative step. The mud makes a wet, sucking sound, clinging to your ankle like a needy toddler who refuses to let go at daycare. You pull your foot free with a soft thwack and trudge forward. This is the first hurdle of medieval dating, simply arriving at your destination without looking like you've been dragged through a swamp. You try to walk with a bit of swagger, shoulders back, chin up, trying to project the image of a catch. But it's hard to look debonair when you're hopping between relatively dry patches of ground to avoid ruining your best hose. As you make your way toward the market, the sensory input shifts from your feet to your nose. We need to talk about the smell. Modern noses are spoiled, calibrated to detect the faintest hint of lavender fabric softener or vanilla bean latte. Here, the olfactory landscape is aggressive. You are hit by a wall of wood smoke first. It's the medieval version of cologne, clinging to everyone's hair and clothes because open hearths are the only way to stay warm or cook dinner. It's a cozy smell, honestly, nostalgic and earthy. But beneath the smoke, there are sharper notes. Unwashed wool, tanning leather, which involves urine, the distinct musk of livestock living in close quarters with humans. You might be worrying about your own scent right now. You do a subtle check, sniffing your sleeve. It's ripe. But here's the thing. Everyone else is ripe too. There is a strange comfort in the collective lack of sanitation. It levels the playing field. If you smell like a wet dog and wood smoke, and your potential crush smells like a wet dog and wood smoke, it cancels out, right? Actually, historians still argue whether medieval people were as nose-blind as we assume, or if they were secretly desperate for freshness. Some scholars insist that the filthy Middle Ages is a Victorian myth and that people washed quite often, while others point to records suggesting that full-body immersion was viewed with deep suspicion. The truth, as you experience it right now, is somewhere in the murky middle. You aren't caked in dirt, but you definitely haven't seen a bar of soap in a way a modern person would recognize. You pass by a building with steam drifting out of the shutters. This is the stew, the public bathhouse. It's a place of contradictions. On one hand, it's one of the few places you can get properly clean, soaking in a large wooden tub with herbs floating in the water to mask the stagnation. On the other hand, the church keeps telling you these places are dens of iniquity, where people go not just to scrub their backs, but to engage in activities that would make a priest blush. Going there might make you smell better for your date, but being seen coming out of one might ruin your reputation before you even say hello. It's a classic medieval dilemma: be clean and suspicious, or be dirty and pious. You decide to skip the bathhouse today. Instead, you rely on the dry clean method. You rubbed your face with a linen cloth this morning and washed your hands in a basin. That's the standard for polite society. Clean hands and a clean face imply a clean soul. The rest of your body is your own private ecosystem, hidden under layers of linen and wool. As you weave through the crowd, dodging a cart piled high with turnips, you notice how people manage the atmosphere. You see a woman holding a small bundle of herbs to her nose, a nosegay. It's a little bouquet of rosemary, lavender, and thyme. She buries her face in it as she passes a particularly fragrant butcher's stall. This is your competition, and also your strategy. If you want to impress someone, you don't just bring yourself, you bring a pleasant microclimate. Maybe you should have shoved some dried mint in your pockets. Too late now. You catch sight of a group of young people gathering near the village well. The well is the medieval equivalent of the water cooler or the break room. It's where gossip is exchanged, where news travels, and where people go to be seen. You straighten your tunic. You check your teeth with your tongue. Sugar is a rare luxury for the super rich, so your teeth are actually in decent shape, minus the wear and tear from grit in the bread. You have a full set, which in this era is practically a supermodel feature. But as you get closer, you realize the challenge isn't just hygiene, it's the sheer density of life. There is no personal space here. Pigs are wandering through the legs of the crowd. Chickens are flapping onto shoulders. To date in this world, you have to be comfortable with the lack of privacy. You can't just pull someone aside for a quiet chat because aside is currently occupied by a goat chewing on a wicker basket. You finally lock eyes with someone across the square. They are wearing a russet tunic, slightly frayed at the hem, and they are holding a basket of eggs. They smile. You smile back. And then, a horse that hasn't been potty trained stops directly between you two and does what horses do. The romantic tension is broken by the immediate, steaming reality of agriculture. You both laugh. It's a good sign in a world this messy. A shared sense of humor about the biological realities of life is essential. You step around the horse, your shoes squelching again, closing the distance. The air smells of smoke and animals. Your feet are cold, and you are pretty sure you have a flea exploring your ribcage. But as you get closer, and the noise of the market fades into a rhythmic hum, you realize that despite the odor and the mud, the human connection feels exactly the same as it ever will. You are just two people standing in the dirt, hoping to find something beautiful in the mess. You pull back slightly from that shared laugh over the incontinent horse. It was a nice moment, a human moment, but now the analytical part of your brain kicks in. You take a quick, subtle inventory of the person standing opposite you. You look at the fabric of their tunic. Is that rough spun wool, scratchy, and dyed a dull brown with walnut shells? Or is it something smoother, perhaps a weave that catches the sunlight with a hint of blue woad? You check their shoes again. Are they practical leather like yours, or is there a decorative point to the toe that suggests they don't do much walking in the mud? This isn't you being shallow, this is a survival mechanism. In the modern world, dating someone from a different tax bracket might make for awkward conversations about who pays for dinner or whether to vacation in the Hamptons or a tent in the backyard. In the medieval world, dating outside your station isn't just awkward, it is a bureaucratic nightmare that can ruin your life, your family's reputation, and possibly get you fined by the local lord. You are navigating the invisible, electrified fences of the medieval class system. It's often described as a pyramid, but from where you are standing, it feels more like a maze with very high walls. You know exactly where you fit. You are likely a peasant or a small town artisan. That means your dating pool is geographically and socially puddle-sized. You can't just swipe right on a knight. You can't even make prolonged eye contact with a knight without it being weird. Let's say, for the sake of a daydream, you spot someone truly highborn riding through the market. They are up on a destrier, a massive war horse that costs more than your entire village earns in a year. They are wearing velvet, actual velvet. It looks soft, deep, and utterly impractical. You might feel a flutter of attraction, but you immediately squash it. Why? Because of sumptuary laws. These are laws designed specifically to stop people like you from dressing like people like them. The government is literally policing your drip. If you, a commoner, manage to save up enough money to buy a piece of ermine fur or a specific shade of royal purple cloth to impress a date, you wouldn't get a second date. You'd get a magistrate knocking on your door. Fashion is state-controlled. This creates a visual code that instantly tells you who is off limits. You see fur, you walk away. You see silk, you look at the ground. It kills the mystery of, is she out of my league? Because the law clearly states, yes, she is, and she has the hat to prove it. But even among your own kind, the regular folk, there are layers. You might be a free tenant, meaning you rent your land and can move around. The person with the eggs might be a serf or a villain. This is a tricky distinction. If they are a serf, they are legally bound to the land they were born on. They belong to the lord of the manor in a way that is uncomfortably close to property. Here is where the romance hits a wall of red tape. Let's say you fall madly in love with a serf from the neighboring village. You want to get married. You can't just elope. You have to ask their lord for permission, and the lord is going to do some math. If that serf marries you and moves to your village, the lord loses a worker. He loses the future children of that marriage, who would also be workers. So he will charge a fee called merche. It's a fine for marriage. You literally have to pay a penalty to the government to unlock your partner. It's the original microtransaction, and it is not cheap. You stand there in the market, doing the mental calculus. Can you afford the fine? If you take them away from their harvest duties, will the bailiff come looking for you? It takes the spontaneity out of the courtship. You aren't just winning a heart, you are negotiating a labor contract transfer. Historians still argue whether this rigid structure completely crushed romantic love or just drove it underground. Some scholars suggest that because the stakes were so high, medieval people were actually more pragmatic than romantic. viewing marriage as a business merger between two peasant families to consolidate a few acres of turnips. Others argue that the court records, full of people paying fines for illicit marriages or running away together, prove that love constantly broke the rules. You like to think it's the latter. There is something rebellious about holding hands when the feudal system explicitly prefers you to keep your hands on a plow. You look back at the egg carrier. They seem to be of a similar station to you. Russet wool, sturdy shoes, a general vibe of, I work for a living. This is safe, but even here, there are guilds to consider. If you are a weaver's son and she is a butcher's daughter, you are crossing professional lines. The guilds are powerful, secretive organizations. They have their own holidays, their own patron saints, and their own rivalries. Marrying into a rival guild is like a Pepsi employee marrying a Coke executive, but with more cudgels involved if things go wrong at the wedding reception. There is a fringe theory, a quirky tidbit of history, that suggests in some highly specific regions the wild nature of the frontiers, like the borderlands between England and Scotland, created a chaotic dating scene where the rules collapsed entirely. Kidnapping your bride, or groom, was sometimes a recognized, if not exactly legal, way to bypass the class negotiations. It was called marriage by capture, though often it was staged, a dramatic play acting agreed upon by both sides to save face and avoid dowries. But you are not in the wild borderlands. You are in a tidy, regulated town. You realize that your type is socially engineered. You are attracted to what is accessible, the impossible beauty of the high nobility, with their plucked hairlines and elongated shoes, doesn't even register as hot to you. It registers as alien and dangerous. You find comfort in the practical. You look for strong hands that can churn butter or swing a hammer. You look for wide hips or broad shoulders, not just for aesthetic reasons, but because they promise survival. The crowd shifts, pushing you closer to your potential match. The social distance is bridged by the physical crush of bodies. You are reminded that while the laws say you are different, serf, freeman, apprentice, master, you are all breathing the same smoky air. You offer a small nod, a safe gesture. It acknowledges interest without promising a dowry. You realize that finding love here isn't about finding a soulmate who completes you in a spiritual sense. It's about finding a partner who fits into the jagged puzzle piece of your social existence. You need someone who can stand on the same rung of the ladder as you without breaking it. It's unromantic, perhaps, but there is a quiet dignity in it. You aren't looking for a fairy tale prince or princess. You are looking for a teammate. The sun climbs higher, warming the back of your neck. The complexities of the class system make your head spin a little. It's exhausting, constantly checking for invisible badges of rank. You decide to keep it simple. If they don't have a sword, and they aren't wearing a crown, and they don't smell like they live in a pigsty, or at least no more than you do, they are a candidate. You step forward, ready to initiate conversation, navigating the maze, one careful word at a time. You finally manage to strike up a conversation with the egg carrier, trading a few shy pleasantries about the quality of the market stalls and the unseasonable mud. But as you stand there, your gaze drifts past their shoulder to a woman walking near the cloth merchant's booth. She is clearly of a higher status, maybe of a wealthy merchant's wife or minor nobility, and her appearance stops you in your tracks. In the modern world, you are used to a very specific beauty standard: tan skin, full hair, maybe a touch of bronzer. You look at this woman, and your first instinct is to wonder if she is ill. She is pale, aggressively, glaringly pale. Her skin looks like skimmed milk. This isn't just stayed indoors, pale. This is has never seen the sun and might be a ghost pale. Welcome to the medieval beauty industry, where looking healthy is for peasants who work in the fields, and looking like you are on the verge of consumption is the height of fashion. That tan you worked so hard on last summer? Here, it's a mark of poverty. It means you labor outdoors. The rich want to look as though they have never lifted anything heavier than a goblet of wine. But the most striking thing about her face is her forehead. It is enormous. It stretches up and up, seemingly defying anatomy. You stare, fascinated, and slightly horrified. Has she receded? Is it a genetic trait? No, it's a choice. This is the high forehead trend, and women are plucking their hairlines back by an inch or more to achieve it. They want an expansive, domed brow that suggests high intelligence and nobility. You wince, imagining the process. There are no gentle wax strips here. We are talking about tweezers, often made of brass or iron, plucking hair by hair. Sometimes, to prevent regrowth, they rub the raw skin with mixtures of vinegar, cat dung, or quicklime. It's a painful, burning commitment to fashion, and they don't stop at the hairline. Eyebrows, gone. Barely a pencil-thin line remains, if that. The goal is a blank, smooth canvas, an egg-like perfection that emphasizes the eyes. As she turns her head, you catch the light hitting her cheek. It's not just pale, it has a thick, opaque quality. That's the ceruse. This is the killer in the cosmetics bag. Venetian ceruse is the foundation of choice for the elite. It provides that flawless, dead white coverage that hides blemishes, smallpox scars, and freckles. It's incredibly effective. It's also made of white lead and vinegar. You are looking at a woman who is slowly poisoning herself for the gram, or the tapestry in this case. The lead seeps into the skin over time. It causes hair loss, which ironically helps with the high forehead goal, graying of the skin, abdominal pain, and eventual madness. But in the short term, she looks radiant. It's a grim trade-off. Be beautiful today. Be dead by 40. And it's not just the white foundation. You notice a stark red circle on her cheeks. It doesn't look like a natural flush. It looks painted on. Because it is. She's likely using vermilion, which contains mercury, or cinnabar, also mercury. So she has a base layer of lead and a top coat of mercury. Her face is essentially a hazardous waste site. You have to admire the dedication, even as you worry about her heavy metal toxicity levels. Historians still argue about how widespread this was. Was every woman walking around with a lethal chemical peel, or was this just the Instagram filter of the 14th century, something only the hyper-rich did for special occasions? Some evidence suggests that ordinary women used safer alternatives, like flour or chalk for whiteness, and berry juice for rouge. So maybe your egg-carrying friend here is safe from lead poisoning, even if they can't afford the dead ghost look. There is a quirky, fringe recipe you might recall hearing about from a village gossip. It involves using the root of the Madonna lily to bleach the skin. Or, if you want to get really weird, using lotions made from the fat of various animals. Badger grease was rumored to be excellent for the complexion. Imagine the morning routine. Wake up, pluck your forehead with tweezers, slap on some badger grease, and dust yourself with lead powder. The things we do for love. You also notice her hair, What's left of it after the hairline massacre is hidden. It's tucked away under a headdress. In this era, loose hair is for children and unmarried girls. Once you are married, the hair goes up. To show your hair in public is considered intimately undressed. It's the medieval equivalent of walking around in your underwear. The headdress she's wearing is a hennin, that cone-shaped princess hat you see in cartoons. It's tall, wired, and draped with a sheer veil. It forces her to move with a stiff, upright posture, because if she tilts her head too fast, the aerodynamics of the hat will topple her over. You look back at your companion with the eggs. They have a few freckles, their skin is slightly sun-kissed, their eyebrows are intact. Suddenly, this natural look seems infinitely more appealing. It screams, "I am alive, and my organs are functioning." But there is a lingering pressure, even here in the lower ranks. You see a young girl nearby scrubbing her face with something gritty. She's trying to remove a tan. The beauty standard trickles down. Even if she can't afford the lead paint, she knows that fair is the ideal. It creates a strange dissonance. The poets write about milk-white skin and lips like rosebuds, setting a standard that is biologically impossible for anyone who steps outside. You also spot a small, peculiar detail on the wealthy woman's belt. Hanging from a chain is a pomander, a perforated metal ball. Remember the smell of the street? That ball is filled with ambergris, musk, and cloves. It's her personal air freshener, but it's also a beauty tool. Bad smells were thought to cause disease, the miasma theory. Smelling good wasn't just about attraction, it was about health. By surrounding herself with a cloud of spice, she is signaling that she is clean, healthy, and wealthy enough to import scents from the Orient. You watch her glide away, her tall hat bobbing above the crowd, a beacon of toxic beauty. She is a piece of art, constructed carefully and painfully. You realize that dating her would be terrifying. You couldn't touch her face without risking lead exposure. You couldn't ruffle her hair because it's plucked and pinned into submission. She is an object to be admired from a safe distance, not a person to be held. You turn back to the egg carrier. They wipe a smudge of dirt from their cheek with a rough hand. It's real. It's safe. You decide that you prefer your dates to be non-toxic, literally. The deadly cosmetics can stay in the castle. You are happy with the rustic, unplucked, slightly sunburned reality of the village square. You tear your eyes away from the walking chemical hazard in the tall hat and decide to assess the competition on the other side of the gender divide. You might think that while women are enduring lead poisoning and hair plucking, the men are just throwing on a tunic and calling it a day. You would be wrong. If you look at the strutting peacock of a man coming out of the tavern, you realize that medieval masculinity is a high-maintenance, structurally complex, and often deeply uncomfortable performance art. You examine his silhouette. It is an inverted triangle, broad, padded shoulders tapering down to a waist so cinched it looks like he's holding his breath, and then exploding into legs that are defined by tights so tight they leave absolutely nothing to the imagination. This is the era of showing off the calf. If you are a guy in this time period, your calves are your biceps. You want them shapely, muscular, and encased in wool that fits like a second skin. But the centerpiece of this ensemble, the thing that draws your eye whether you want it to or not, is the codpiece. You stare. It's hard not to. It is right there, front and center, asserting itself with the subtlety of a foghorn in a library. In the modern world, Men's fashion generally tries to flatten, hide, or ignore this particular anatomy. Here, the fashion philosophy is let's build a small, decorated shelf for it and maybe paint it a contrasting color. The origin of this fashion statement is actually practical, or at least it started that way. You see, trousers as you know them, one garment with two legs and a seat, don't really exist yet. Men wear hose, which are essentially two separate long stockings that tie up to the waist of their doublet. This design flaw creates a significant problem: the gap in the middle. If a man bows too low or sits carelessly, he risks exposing the family jewels to the drafty air and the public eye. Originally, a simple triangular flap of cloth was added just to bridge the gap and preserve modesty. But humans being humans, and men being men, someone eventually looked at that flap and thought, you know what, I could make this bigger. And so, the codpiece evolved from a modesty panel into a billboard. The man you are watching is wearing one that looks like it's been padded, and it almost certainly has. This is the push-up bra of the 16th century. It is an open secret that men are stuffing these pouches with wool, linen, or sawdust to achieve a more impressive profile. It's false advertising on a massive scale. Historians still argue fiercely about the true catalyst for the giant codpiece era. The mainstream view is that it was simply a display of aggressive virility, popularized by monarchs like Henry VIII, who wanted to project power from every possible angle. However, there is a grimmer theory debated in medical history circles. Some scholars suggest the oversized codpiece became necessary to accommodate bulky bandages and poultices used to treat syphilis, which was rampaging through Europe at the time. So, when you see a man with a massive, ornate codpiece, he might be signaling, I am a virile stallion, or he might be signaling, I have a very painful infection and I need the extra room. It adds a layer of Russian roulette to the dating scene that you definitely didn't ask for. You notice this particular dandy's codpiece is slashed, cuts made in the outer fabric to pull the colorful lining through. It matches his sleeves. It's a coordinated accessory. But here's the quirky fringe detail that really blows your mind. The codpiece isn't just for show, it's for storage. Because pockets aren't really a thing yet, men need places to put their stuff. And since the codpiece is hollow and padded, it becomes a convenient, if slightly disturbing, fanny pack. You watch as the man reaches into his codpiece and pulls out a handkerchief. You have heard rumors of men keeping coins, small snacks, or even oranges in there. Imagine the romance of that moment. A man reaches into his crotch and produces a warm, slightly squashed orange to offer you as a token of affection. It brings a whole new meaning to giving of oneself. You look down at your own attire. You are likely wearing a longer tunic, the mark of a humbler man. The long tunic is safe. It's comfortable. It doesn't require structural engineering to keep your pants up. But you can feel the pressure of the trend. Even the village lads are starting to hike their hemlines, trying to emulate the lords. But looking at the fashionable man, you realize the physical cost of this look. He walks with a stiff, rolling gait. He can't really bend at the waist because his doublet is stiffened with whalebone or canvas. His hose are so tight that if he squats, he risks a blowout that would be the talk of the town for weeks. He is essentially trapped in a fabric cage of his own making. And let's talk about the points, the little laces with metal tips used to tie the hose to the doublet. Getting dressed in the morning is a two-person job. You need a squire or a very patient mother to tie you into your clothes. And if nature calls, you are in trouble. Untying a dozen knots while desperate for the latrine is a medieval panic attack waiting to happen. It makes you wonder how spontaneous romance can even happen. The undressing phase of a date isn't a passionate, sweeping moment. It's a 20-minute logistical operation involving nimble fingers and a lot of swearing at knotted laces. You watch the dandy try to sit down on a bench. It's a process. He has to splay his legs wide to accommodate the padding, and he lowers himself with the grace of a man wearing a cardboard box. It looks exhausting. The message this fashion sends is contradictory. On one hand, it screams, "I am a warrior. I am strong. Look at my reproductive potential." On the other hand, it says, "I cannot tie my own shoes, and I am carrying a lemon in my pants." It's a fragility wrapped in bravado. Just like the woman with the lead makeup, this man is suffering for his art. He is prioritizing the silhouette over the human being inside it. You feel a strange sense of relief in your loose, muddy woolens. You might not be turning heads with an exaggerated profile, but you can sit, stand, and walk without fearing a wardrobe malfunction. You look back at the egg carrier, who is also watching the dandy with a mix of amusement and confusion. You share another look. This time it says, "I'm glad we're normal." But the dandy stands up, adjusts his enormous codpiece with a proud tug, and struts away. He believes he is the apex predator of the dating scene, and in a way, he is. He has the confidence of a man who has successfully stuffed a pair of socks down his trousers and convinced the world it's natural. There is a lesson there somewhere about confidence being 90% of attraction, even if the other 10% is sawdust padding. You turn away, leaving the world of high fashion behind. You have navigated the smells, the class system, the toxic makeup, and the aggressive crotch wear. But now, as you look at the sky, you realize there is a bigger, more powerful force controlling your love life than just fashion or hygiene. You check the position of the sun. It's getting late. And looking at the calendar, you realize you might have picked the wrong day entirely to look for love. In fact, you might have picked the wrong month. You stand there in the fading light, mentally scheduling your next move with the egg carrier, only to realize that your schedule is not your own. In the modern world, the only thing stopping a date is a conflicting work shift or a dentist appointment. Here, your romantic life is subject to a celestial HR department known as the church, and let me tell you, their blackout dates are extensive. You might think that once you are married, or at least betrothed, you have a green light. But the medieval church views passion, even within marriage, with a deeply suspicious eye. They have developed a complex calendar of forbidden love, a schedule so restrictive that if you actually followed it to the letter, the survival of the human race would be a statistical miracle. You do the math in your head. Is it Advent? That's the 4 weeks before Christmas. If so, romance is canceled. You are supposed to be reflecting on the coming of the Savior, not making eyes at the miller's son. Is it Lent? That is the 40 days before Easter, definitely canceled. In fact, Lent is the ultimate mood killer. The diet is restricted, the mood is somber, and the church bells ring with a heavy, guilt-inducing thud. Trying to flirt during Lent is like trying to crack a joke at a funeral. It's just bad form. But the blockout dates don't stop there. You have to account for the feast days, and in the medieval calendar, there is a feast day for everything. Saints who? Doesn't matter. No romance. Pentecost? No. The rogation days? No. If you pull out a calendar and shade in all the days where the church says abstain, you are left with a very patchy year. And then there is the weekly cycle. Let's say you navigate the seasons correctly. You find a nice Tuesday in October. Great. But wait, is it Wednesday? Some theologians argue Wednesday is off limits because that's the day Judas betrayed Jesus. Friday? Absolutely not. That's the day of the crucifixion. Sunday? That's the Lord's Day, and using it for carnal pleasure is considered a misuse of holy time. Saturday? That is often dedicated to the Virgin Mary, so you should probably keep it pure. So, if you follow the strictest interpretation of the rules, which admittedly are mostly written by monks who have taken vows of celibacy and seem determined to make everyone else miserable too, you are left with Monday and Thursday. Maybe, unless it's a saint's day. You look at your potential partner and realize that dating in the Middle Ages requires a spreadsheet. You aren't just looking for chemistry, you are looking for a scheduling loophole. It turns the act of love into a logistical puzzle. I really like you, you might say, and I'd love to court you, but I'm booked up with piety until next Tuesday. Historians still argue fiercely about how much regular people actually listen to this. It's the classic debate of prescription versus practice. Did the peasant in the field really check the liturgical calendar before blowing a huss to his wife? Some scholars analyze birth records and find seasonal dips in conceptions during Lent, suggesting that, yes, people were terrified enough of hellfire to keep their distance. Others argue that human nature is undefeated, and that once the cottage door was closed, the church's rules stayed outside in the cold. You suspect it's a mix. You probably follow the big ones. Lent is hard to ignore when the whole village is eating salted fish and looking miserable, but you might fudge the rules on a random Wednesday. But the church doesn't just police the when. They also have strong opinions on the why. You see, in the medieval mindset, sex is for procreation, full stop. Pleasure is a byproduct, and a dangerous one at that. If you enjoy it too much, even with your lawful spouse, that is considered a sin. It's called uxoriousness, loving your wife too much. Imagine that being a crime. Forgive me, Father, for I am really into my wife. It's a bizarre tightrope walk where you are supposed to do the deed to make the next generation of plowmen, but you aren't supposed to have a good time doing it. This brings us to one of the quirkier, fringe aspects of medieval romantic regulation, the penitentials. These were guidebooks for priests, listing every conceivable sin and the corresponding punishment, usually fasting on bread and water. They are oddly specific. They read like a menu of don'ts. There are penances for doing it in the daytime, for doing it naked. Some texts suggest wearing a chemise cagoule, a heavy nightshirt with a strategically placed hole, though this might be more myth than reality, and for doing it in any position other than the standard missionary. You imagine the local priest, Father Thomas, who you saw earlier, tripping over a pig. He holds the keys to your romantic guilt. If you confess to breaking the calendar rules, he might assign you a penance of fasting for 20 days. Suddenly, that date night doesn't seem worth the 3 weeks of starvation that follow. There is a theory that this heavy regulation actually made the rare, permitted moments more intense. Scarcity creates value, right? If you can only be intimate on a Monday in October, that Monday becomes the Super Bowl of your relationship. You prepare for it. You anticipate it. The repression feeds the obsession. You look around the village. The church tower dominates the skyline. It's the tallest thing for miles. It's a physical reminder that God is watching. And not just God, the neighbors are watching too. In a small community, everyone knows who is sneaking into the barn during Lent. The social pressure to conform to the holy schedule is immense. If the crops fail next year, people might blame it on the fact that you and the baker's daughter didn't observe the Ember Days correctly. Your love life is a matter of public safety. This makes the act of dating feel illicit, even when it's technically allowed. It adds a layer of thrill, a me against the world vibe. You are stealing moments of affection from a universe that wants you to be stoic. A held hand behind a cart during Advent feels like a revolutionary act. But as you stand there, contemplating the headache of the calendar, you realize that this system applies mostly to you, the common folk, and the pious middle class. Up in the castle, on the hill you can see in the distance, the rules are different. The nobility have their own chaplains, their own private spaces, and enough money to buy indulgences or pay for extra prayers to offset their fun. In fact, the aristocracy has invented an entire counterculture to this strict religious framework. They have turned suffering and repression into a game. They don't just date, they perform. They have taken the forbidden aspect of the church's rules and twisted it into an art form where the fact that you can't have someone is the whole point. You look away from the church tower and up toward the stone battlements of the local lord's keep. You've heard stories of what goes on up there. It's not the muddy, pragmatic struggle of the market square. It's a world of secret signals, poetry, and dangerous obsessions. It's a place where they don't worry about whether it's Wednesday. They worry about whether it's treason. You decide to mentally leave the village for a moment. The mud is drying on your boots, and the smell of the pigs is getting old. You let your imagination drift up the hill, past the portcullis, into the great hall where the air smells of roasted swan and beeswax. You are about to trade the church's calendar of no for the court's complex rulebook of maybe. You mentally ascend the hill and pass through the heavy oak doors of the castle. The air here is different. It's still smoky, but it's a refined smoke, scented with expensive wood and the wax of 100 candles. The noise of the pigs and the shouting merchants is replaced by the soft strumming of a lute and the rustle of silk. But don't relax. You have just entered the most confusing, high-stakes dating simulation ever invented, courtly love. If dating in the village is about survival and biology, dating in the castle is about suffering and poetry. Here, nobody just likes anyone. That would be vulgar. Here, you must yearn, you must pine, you must look at your beloved with the expression of a golden retriever who has just been told he's a bad boy. This is the system of Finamore, or fine love. It was invented, arguably, by the troubadours of southern France, bored aristocrats who decided to turn adultery into a competitive sport. The core rule is simple. The person you love must be unattainable. Ideally, she should be married to someone else, preferably your boss, the Lord. This ensures that the relationship can never be consummated, which means the sexual tension can be stretched out indefinitely, like a piece of very expensive taffy. You watch a young knight, let's call him Sir Pining, approach a lady. He doesn't ask her if she wants to grab a mead. He kneels. He declares himself her vassal. In the feudal system, a knight serves his lord. In the system of courtly love, the knight serves his lady. He is her slave. If she tells him to jump off a bridge, he is supposed to write a sonnet about how beautiful the water looks before he leaps. This flips the actual gender dynamics of the Middle Ages on their head. In reality, women have very little legal power. But in this specific game, the lady is an absolute dictator. She is the domina. She holds the power of life and death over his heart. It's a fantasy roleplay that allows the aristocracy to escape the rigid political marriages they are trapped in. Sir Pining is currently in Phase 1, the gaze. He stares at her. She ignores him. This is crucial. If she smiled back immediately, the game would be over and everyone would be disappointed. She must be cold, distant, and cruel. She is the ice queen, and he is the fire trying to melt her. He might spend months just trying to get a nod. He will write poems comparing her eyes to stars, her skin to lilies, and her breath to the scent of paradise, which, given the dental hygiene of the time, is high praise. But here is the catch. He can't use her real name. That would be a scandal. He has to use a code name, a senhal. He might call her my fair enemy, or the rose of silence. It's like subtweeting, but with parchment and calligraphy. Historians still argue about whether courtly love was real or just a literary fad. Did knights actually do this, or did they just like reading stories about it? It's likely a bit of both. We have records of courts of love, mock trials where noblewomen would judge romantic disputes. Is it true love if he didn't faint when he saw me? They might ask. And the jury would debate it for hours. It sounds like a fun party game until you remember that real reputations were on the line. You notice Sir Pining is looking a bit rough. He's pale, he's not eating, he's sighing constantly. This is love sickness. In the medieval medical worldview, this is a genuine illness. It's caused by the image of the beloved entering the eyes, traveling to the heart, and overheating the blood. The cure? There isn't one, except either getting the girl, unlikely, or finding a new hobby. Physicians actually prescribed travel, baths, or, in extreme cases, therapeutic intercourse with someone else to relieve the pressure. But the ultimate goal of courtly love isn't sex. It's spiritual elevation. By loving someone so perfect and so out of reach, the knight becomes a better person. He learns patience, humility, and bravery. He goes out and wins tournaments in her honor, wearing her sleeve on his lance. It's the original friend zone training program. He does all the work, takes all the risks, and his reward is a smile. Maybe. There is a fringe theory that this whole system was actually a clever way to control the rampant violence of young knights. You have a castle full of armed, testosterone-fueled men with nothing to do. By redirecting their energy toward writing poetry and worshiping the boss's wife in a strictly non-physical way, you keep them from killing each other or plotting rebellion. It domesticates the warrior class through romance. However, the game has a dark side. It walks a razor's edge. Everyone knows the story of Lancelot and Guinevere. They played the game, but they broke the rules. They crossed the line from spiritual yearning to physical affair, and it destroyed the kingdom. That is the tension in the room right now. Everyone is watching Sir Pining and the lady. Is he just playing the game, or is he actually in love? The line between polite courtly flirtation and treasonous adultery is blurry, and crossing it can lead to beheading. You see the lady finally acknowledge him. She drops a glove. It's accidental, or is it? Sir Pining scrambles to pick it up. He holds it like a holy relic. This is a favor. He will probably sleep with this glove under his pillow. He might even talk to it. It's a fetishization of objects because the person is untouchable. Imagine trying to date in this environment. You can't be direct. You can't be honest. You have to speak in riddles and metaphors. I like your dress becomes the azure of your gown shames the very heavens. It's exhausting. You have to be a poet, a lawyer, and an actor all at once. And you have to do it all while wearing tights that cut off your circulation. But for the nobles, this complexity is the point. It separates them from the peasants. Peasants just mate. Nobles love. They have refined the emotion into a high art form that requires education, leisure time, and a lot of disposable income for bribes and gifts. It is a status symbol to be heartbroken. As you watch Sir Pining compose a stanza in his head, you realize that despite the glamour, this looks incredibly lonely. It's a love based on distance, on absence. It's about loving an idea of a person rather than the person themselves. The lady isn't allowed to be a real human with flaws and bad days. She has to be a pedestal-bound goddess 24/7. And the knight isn't a partner, he's a fan. You feel a tug back towards the reality of the village. The air up here is too thin. The stakes are too artificial. You crave something grounded. You want to see what happens when the poetry stops and the harvest begins. You want to know what dating looks like when you don't have time to pine because you have to bring the wheat in before the rain starts. You leave the great hall, slipping out before anyone asks you to critique their sonnet. You head back down the hill towards the fields that surround the village. The sun is setting, casting long golden shadows over the crops. And there, among the stalks of grain, you find a very different kind of romance unfolding. It's not courtly, it's not polite, and it's definitely not boring. You leave the suffocating perfume of the castle behind and descend the hill. As the stone walls recede, the air changes again. The scent of beeswax and repressed desire is replaced by something far more potent, the smell of cut grass, sun-baked earth, and the sweet, fermenting tang of crushed apples. You are entering the fields, and it is harvest time. If the castle was a theater of the mind, the village fields are a theater of the body. In the modern world, work and dating are usually kept strictly separate. You don't typically flirt while filling out spreadsheets, or at least HR strongly advises against it. But here, the harvest is the ultimate mixer. It is the one time of year when the rigid gender segregation of medieval labor collapses. Usually, men plow and women spin, keeping to their separate spheres. But when the wheat is ripe, it's all hands on deck. The village needs every able-bodied person to bring in the crops before the rains come, and that urgency creates a sudden, giddy freedom. You walk along the edge of a field of golden rye. The stalks are tall, creating a maze of privacy in what is usually a very public existence. You see lines of reapers moving in a rhythm, the swish-thwack of the scythes acting as a metronome. Behind them are the binders, usually women, gathering the cut grain into sheaves. It is hard, sweaty, back-breaking work, but there is an electric energy in the air. You spot your friend, the egg carrier from the market. They are out here too, sleeves rolled up, face flushed with exertion. There is no lead paint here, no whalebone corsets. The heat of the day has stripped away the pretenses. People are stripped down to their linen undertunics. It's the medieval equivalent of a beach party, just with more agricultural equipment. You realize that for the peasantry, this is dating. There are no candlelit dinners. There is only working next to each other for 14 hours. But there is an intimacy in the shared struggle. You watch a young man pause to sharpen his scythe, and a woman steps forward to offer him a drink from a leather costrel of cider. Their fingers brush. It's a small gesture, but out here in the open air, under the watchful but exhausted eyes of the village elders, it speaks volumes. Historians still argue whether this seasonal license was a genuine collapse of moral order or just a safety valve sanctioned by the community. Some scholars point to the spike in illegitimate births recorded in parish registers 9 months after the harvest festivals as proof that the fields were essentially an open-air singles bar. Others suggest that because many of these couples eventually married, the community viewed these harvest flings as a valid form of trial marriage, a try before you buy approach that the church hated but couldn't stop. You find a spot to sit near a stook, a pyramid of drying wheat sheaves. It provides a nice backrest and a bit of shade. As you watch the workers, you notice the games beginning. The harvest isn't just work, it's a superstitious ritual. You see a reaper deliberately leave a small patch of corn standing in the center of the field. This is for the corn spirit, or the hare, to hide in, but it also becomes a focal point for a game. The men take turns throwing their sickles at the last standing sheaf. It's a display of skill and strength, medieval darts. The winner gets a prize, often a kiss from the harvest queen, a local girl chosen to preside over the festivities. It's a socially sanctioned way to break the touch barrier. You imagine Sir Pining Up in the castle, writing a sonnet about a glove for 3 weeks, while down here, a guy just threw a knife at a plant and got a kiss. The efficiency of the peasant method is undeniable. And then there is the gleaning. This happens after the main harvest, where the poor are allowed to scour the fields for leftovers. It is a quieter, slower time. You see couples wandering the stubble, ostensibly looking for dropped ears of grain, but mostly just looking at each other. The tall hedges and the twilight provide cover. This is where the real conversations happen, away from the noise of the reapers. You also notice the role of food in this rustic romance. Up in the castle, dining is a formal, hierarchical nightmare where you have to worry about salt placement. Here, it's a picnic. People are sharing loaves of dark rye bread, chunks of cheese, and onions. There is a quirky, fringe tradition in some regions involving love divination with apple peels. You watch a girl pare an apple in one long, continuous strip. She throws the peel over her left shoulder. The shape it lands in is supposed to form the initial of her future husband. It looks like a squiggle to you, but she seems convinced it's a J for John the Miller. But the real lubricant of the harvest romance is the ale, not the weak, small beer everyone drinks for breakfast, but the strong harvest ale brewed specifically for this occasion. It's thick, sweet, and potent. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, turning the sky a bruised purple, the work stops and the drinking begins. You hear the sound of a fiddle starting up. It's scratchy and out of tune, but nobody cares. A space is cleared in the stubble for dancing. This isn't the slow, stately processing of the court. This is a carol, a circle dance where everyone holds hands and spins until they are dizzy. It's physical, it's chaotic. If you want to hold someone's hand, you just join the line next to them. The momentum of the dance throws you together. You stumble, they catch you. It's the perfect excuse for contact. However, there is a limit to this freedom. You might think the fields are a lawless zone, but the village operates on a system of rough music or charivari. If a couple takes things too far and violates the community norms, say, an old man marrying a very young girl, or a husband allowing himself to be dominated by his wife, the village will gather outside their house, banging pots and pans to shame them. So, while you can flirt in the hay, you have to be careful not to trigger a noise complaint from the moral police. You lean back against the scratchy wheat. The air is cooling rapidly, the heat of the day radiating up from the soil. You watch the silhouettes of the dancers against the darkening sky. It feels primal and honest. There is no lead makeup melting off anyone's face here. There are no codpieces being adjusted. There is just the smell of sweat, the taste of cider, and the simple biological imperative to find warmth against the coming winter. The haystacks themselves loom like silent giants in the twilight. They are the cliches of rustic romance for a reason. They are warm, dry, and private. You see a couple slipping away from the firelight towards the shadows of a large rick. They aren't reciting poetry. They are just two people seizing a moment of joy in a life that is often short and brutal. You realize that the boring history of the peasantry is actually full of life. They don't have the luxury of boredom. They grab happiness with both hands whenever the season allows. You feel a strange sense of peace watching them. The pressure is off. You don't need a dowry right now. You don't need a title. You just need to be able to dance in a circle without falling over. But as the moon rises, large and harvest yellow, you remember that love isn't always this simple. Sometimes you need a little extra help. Sometimes the apple peel doesn't give you a clear letter, and the dance doesn't land you next to the right person. Sometimes you need to call in the professionals. And in a medieval village, that doesn't mean a therapist. It means the person who lives in the hut at the edge of the woods. You step away from the warmth of the harvest bonfire, the sound of the fiddle fading behind you into the night. The apple peel didn't form a letter you recognized, and the dance only resulted in a bruised toe, not a marriage proposal. So, you have decided to escalate the situation. You are leaving the realm of standard social interaction and entering the gray market of supernatural assistance. You walk toward the edge of the woods. The trees here loom large and skeletal against the moonlight. You are looking for a small, unassuming hut that leans slightly to the left, much like its owner's relationship with the local church authorities. You are going to visit the wise woman, or the cunning woman. In the modern world, if you are having trouble dating, you might hire a matchmaker, subscribe to a premium app, or read a self-help book. In the Middle Ages, you go to a woman who lives with a lot of cats and ask her to brew something that forces the universe to cooperate. She is the medieval solution to the problem of free will. If they won't love you voluntarily, chemical and spiritual coercion is the next logical step. You knock on the door. It opens with a creak that sounds sound effect perfect. The smell hitting you isn't the wood smoke of the village. It's sharper. It smells of dried sage, vinegar, and something distinctly animalistic. The woman inside doesn't look like the green-skinned hag of fairy tales. She looks like a grandmother, perhaps a bit disheveled, wiping her hands on an apron stained with things you'd rather not identify. You explain your situation. You need a love filter, a potion. She nods knowingly, This is her bread and butter. People come to her for lost cows and lost loves in equal measure. She beckons you to the table, which is cluttered with jars containing dried roots, powders, and things floating in liquid. First, she offers you the top shelf stuff. This is dangerous territory. She holds up a small vial of crushed powder. Spanish fly, she whispers. This is the Viagra of the pre-industrial age. It's actually made from the dried, crushed bodies of a blister beetle, Lita vesicatoria. The logic is terrifyingly simple. The beetle contains a chemical called cantharidin. When ingested, it irritates the body's tissues, causing swelling and heat in specific areas. You stare at the beetle powder. It's not an aphrodisiac in the sense that it creates romance. It creates inflammation that mimics arousal. It's also a potent poison. If you slip the wrong dosage into your beloved's ale, you aren't going to get a date. You are going to get a manslaughter charge. You politely decline the beetle juice. You want love, not a medical emergency. She nods and moves to the botanical collection. She pulls out a root that looks disturbingly like a little shriveled person. Mandrake, she says. This is legendary stuff. The folklore says that when you pull a mandrake from the earth, it screams, a scream so piercing it can kill the harvester. The workaround? You tie a hungry dog to the plant, throw a piece of meat just out of reach, and plug your ears. The dog lunges, pulls up the root, and, well, sorry about the dog. But the root itself is prized. Under the doctrine of signatures, the medieval belief that plants look like the body parts they are meant to treat, the human-shaped mandrake is the ultimate cure for fertility and passion. She offers to shave a little bit into a pouch for you to wear. It's safer than eating it. However, the most common ingredients in love magic are far more personal and, frankly, much grosser. The wise woman explains the principle of sympathetic magic. To bind someone to you, you need to mix your essence with theirs. She suggests you provide some hair, some fingernail clippings, or, if you are feeling brave, some blood. You watch as she grinds herbs in a mortar. There is a quirky fringe practice she might suggest if you were a woman trying to entrap a man. Cockle bread. This involves a woman kneading dough on her own body. Specifically, she would lift her skirts and roll the dough on her skin to infuse it with her sweat and scent before baking it and feeding it to the unsuspecting guy. It brings a whole new, horrifying context to the phrase, bun in the oven. You decide to stick to the herbal tea root. Historians still argue about the societal role of these cunning folk. Were they respected medical practitioners or feared outcasts? The answer is a murky both. The church officially condemned magic, but the local priest often looked the other way, as long as the wise woman wasn't summoning demons. After all, when the doctor is too expensive and the priest says it's God's will, the wise woman is the only one offering an actual action plan. It was a tolerated underground economy of hope. But the line between white magic, healing, love, and black magic, cursing, harm, was razor thin. If your love potion worked, you were a hero. If the neighbor's cow died the same day you brewed it, you were suddenly a suspect. You are engaging in a risky transaction here. You are buying hope, but you are paying with your reputation. The wise woman finishes her brew. It's a muddy, greenish liquid. She pours it into a small clay flask. Put this in their wine, she instructs, or their pottage. She also hands you a small wax figure. This isn't a voodoo doll for pain. It's a poppet for attraction. You are supposed to keep it warm, Talk to it, and perhaps melt it slightly near the fire to symbolize their heart melting for you. It feels a bit possessive, borderline stalkerish, but desperate times call for desperate waxworks. Then there is the issue of ligature or knot magic. She warns you about this. While you want to bind someone to you, you have to be careful not to accidentally knot their ability to perform. There are stories of jealous ex-lovers tying knots and cords during a wedding ceremony to magically induce impotence in the groom. It was considered a genuine threat to public order. You promise to be responsible with your knots. You hand over the payment, a basket of eggs and a silver penny. It's a steep price considering the active ingredient might just be ditch water and mint, but you are paying for the placebo effect. If you believe you have a magical edge, you might walk with more confidence. You might make eye contact. You might actually talk to the person instead of staring at your shoes. In that sense, the potion works, even if the chemistry is nonsense. You step back out into the cool night air, clutching your flask of green sludge. You feel a thrill of illicit power. You have hacked the system. You have bypassed the class structure, the church calendar, and the harvest games. You have magic in your pocket. But as you walk back toward the village, the adrenaline fades and a practical problem emerges. You have the potion, you have the desire, but you still have to actually interact with the person to administer the dose. You can't just run up and pour liquid into their mouth. You need a pretext. You need an invitation. And in a world without smartphones, without a postal service for commoners, and without a high literacy rate, simply saying hello or sending a message is a logistical nightmare. You realize that the magic part was easy. The communication part is where the real struggle begins. You look at the flask. It's useless if you can't get close enough to use it. You need a wingman, or a messenger, or a miracle. You stand outside the wise woman's hut, clutching your flask of dubious love potion, and a new plan forms in your mind. You can't just walk up to your crush and spike their drink. That's too aggressive and, frankly, suspicious. You need to pave the way. You need to create an opening. You need to send a message that says, I am thinking of you, and also, would you like to share a pottage sometime? In the modern world, this is the easiest part of dating. You pull out your phone, type, hey, delete it, type, hi, delete it, type, what's up, panic, and send a gif of a cat instead. It takes 30 seconds. In the Middle Ages, sliding into the DMs is a logistical operation that requires a budget, a third-party contractor, and a lot of faith in the postal integrity of street urchins. The first hurdle is the most obvious one. You cannot read, and neither can they. Literacy in the medieval period is a specialized skill, like coding in Python is today. Sure, the clergy can read, and the nobility can read, mostly, and the merchants can read numbers and contracts. But you are a person of the soil. The alphabet is just a series of mysterious squiggles that other people use to make laws you don't understand. So, to send a love note, you have to hire a professional. You head to the market square near the church porch where the scriveners set up their little portable desks. These are the human smartphones of the era. You approach a man with ink-stained fingers and a face that suggests he has heard every possible variation of human stupidity and is unimpressed by all of it. This is the first intimacy killer, dictation. You have to speak your deepest, most vulnerable feelings out loud to a stranger who is probably charging you by the line. Tell her she is like a rose, you stammer. The scribe dips his quill into a pot of ink made from oak galls and iron salts, a mixture that smells faintly of rust and vinegar, and scratches away. He pauses. Do you want rose or lily? Rose costs extra because it takes more ink to flourish the capital R. You realize that your romantic expression is being edited by a bureaucrat. You try to get poetic. Tell her my heart burns like a kiln. The scribe sighs. He probably writes, Greetings. The sender wishes you health, because that is the standard template, and he wants to go to lunch. You have no way of checking his work. You are trusting this man to convey your soul, but he might just be writing a grocery list in the margins. Then there is the issue of materials. You might think he is writing on paper. Nope. Paper is a relatively new import from the East and the Islamic world, and while it's becoming more common in the later Middle Ages, the gold standard is parchment. Parchment is animal skin, usually sheep, goat, or calf, that has been stretched, scraped, and dried under tension. It is durable, beautiful, and expensive. Sending a "you up" text on parchment is like carving a tweet into a slab of marble. It's a serious investment. Because you are on a budget, you might opt for a wax tablet. This is the Snapchat of the Middle Ages. It's a piece of wood with a recessed center filled with black or green wax. You write on it with a stylus. The recipient reads it, then uses the flat end of the stylus to smooth the wax over, erasing the message forever. It's perfect for illicit affairs because there is no paper trail, but it lacks the romance of a letter they can keep tucked in their bodice. Historians still argue about the great divide of literacy. For a long time, it was assumed that the 99% were totally illiterate, but recent archaeological finds, like the birch bark letters from Novgorod in Russia, suggest that ordinary people, even peasants, were sending casual notes about borrowing money, buying fish, and yes, dating. These scraps show a pragmatic, messy literacy that existed below the radar of the official chronicles. So maybe, just maybe, you could scratch a crude I3U into a piece of wood yourself. But assuming you use the scribe, the next problem is delivery. There is no royal mail for you. You have to pay a messenger. Usually, this is a young boy, a trotter, who hangs around the market looking for coin. You hand him the wax tablet and describe your beloved. She has a blue dress. She sells eggs. Don't give it to the woman selling fish. She has a temper. Now you enter the anxiety phase. You have released your message into the wild. Will the boy find her? Will he get distracted and play dice in the alley? Will he give it to her father by mistake? The security vulnerabilities are endless. It's not end-to-end encryption. It's end-to-random kid-to-end. And let's play out the scenario where the message actually arrives. Your crush is standing by her egg basket. A dirty child runs up and hands her a piece of wood covered in scratches. She looks at it. She can't read it. Now she has to find someone to read it to her. This is the ultimate privacy breach. She has to take your intimate declaration of love and hand it to whom? The priest? Her older brother? The same scribe you hired? Suddenly, your private romance is a community theater project. If she asks the priest to read it, and you wrote something spicy about her ankles, she is going to get a lecture on modesty instead of a date. This is why visual puns and symbols became a code for lovers. If you can't write "I love you," you send a drawing, a heart, which didn't look like the modern emoji heart yet, more like a pine cone, a turtle dove, or a knot. You might send a rebus, a puzzle made of pictures, a picture of an eye, a picture of a deer, doe, and a picture of a knot. I do not. Okay, that's a bad example, but you get the idea. You are forced to communicate in emojis because the text interface is broken. There is a famous medieval letter collection from the Paston family in England that gives us a glimpse into this struggle. While they were gentry and could write, their letters are full of anxiety about messages being intercepted, lost, or opened by enemies. They used code names and globs of wax to seal their secrets. For you, the peasant, the seal is just a bit of spit and a prayer. You watch the messenger boy dart off into the crowd. You have done it. You have initiated contact. The waiting period begins. In the modern world, you stare at the 3 dots bouncing on the screen. Here, you just stare at the street corner, hour after hour, wondering if he is coming back with a reply or if he just stole your wax tablet to draw obscene pictures on it. The awkwardness of this system forces a different kind of directness. Because writing is so hard, expensive, and public, people often skipped it entirely and used tokens: a ring, a glove, a ribbon. These objects speak a language that doesn't require a scribe. If she wears the ribbon you sent, it's a yes. If she gives it back, it's a no. If she throws it in the mud, it's a block. But you tried the written word today. You wanted to be sophisticated. You wanted to be a poet. You lean against the church wall, watching the scribe clean his nib. You realize that literacy is power. The ability to speak directly to another person's mind without a middleman is a kind of magic you don't possess. You are locked in a silent world, relying on paid interpreters to translate your heart. Suddenly you see the messenger boy running back. He is out of breath. He skids to a halt in front of you. She says. He pants. You lean in. The suspense is terrible. She says. She doesn't have a penny to pay a scribe to write back, but she smiled. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. She smiled. A smile is free. A smile doesn't require parchment. A smile is the only red receipt that matters. The barrier of illiteracy has been breached, not by words, but by the messenger's report of a facial expression. It's a low bandwidth connection, but the signal is clear. You flip the boy a coin. You have an opening. Now you have to physically get to her past the obstacles we've already discussed: the mud, the class system, the church calendar. But at least you know she knows. You are no longer strangers. You are co-conspirators in a game of telephone. But now that the digital, or rather manual ice is broken, the relationship is moving to the next stage. You can't just send messages forever. You have to meet. And since you can't exactly go to a movie theater or a coffee shop, you have to find a place where you can be together in public without being together. You need a chaperone, even if you don't want one. You arrive at the designated meeting spot. It's a neutral ground, perhaps a bench under the lich gate of the church, or a spot near the village bakehouse, where the smell of rising dough provides a comforting backdrop. You see your crush waiting. Your heart does a little gallop in your chest. But as you get closer, your heart slows down to a disappointed trot, because she is not alone. Sitting right next to her, looking like a gargoyle that has climbed down from the cathedral to ruin your day, is an older woman. She is holding a distaff and spindle, her hands busy spinning wool, but her eyes are fixed on you with the intensity of a sniper. Welcome to the era of the chaperone. In the modern world, a third wheel is an annoyance. In the Middle Ages, a third wheel is a mandatory piece of safety equipment. This woman, let's call her Aunt Agnes, is the human firewall installed by Crush's family to ensure that nothing interesting happens. You approach cautiously. You nod to your crush. You nod to Aunt Agnes. Aunt Agnes does not nod back. She just spins her wool a little faster. You sit down, but not too close. Aunt Agnes shifts slightly, physically blocking the line of sight between you and your beloved's torso. She is marking the territory. The conversation that follows is a masterclass in awkwardness. You can't say, "I haven't stopped thinking about your smile." You have to say, "The turnips are coming in well this year, are they not?" Your crush replies, "Yes, the turnips are indeed robust." Aunt Agnes grunts. It is a grunt that says, "I am watching your hands." This surveillance state exists because in this society, a woman's reputation is a tangible asset. It's like a credit score. If it drops, it destroys her future economic prospects. A woman who is talked about loses her value in the marriage market. Aunt Agnes isn't just being a killjoy, she is protecting an investment. She is the security guard at the bank vault of virginity. Historians still argue about the true effectiveness of this system. The mainstream view is that chaperones were strict enforcers of morality, the moral police of the patriarchal system. But there is a counter-argument that suggests many chaperones were actually facilitators, bribable agents who would look the other way for a glass of wine or a coin. Some literature from the period portrays the duenna, or the nursemaid, as a go-between who secretly helps the lovers while pretending to scold them. You look at Aunt Agnes. She doesn't look like she takes bribes. She looks like she eats gravel for breakfast. You try to make eye contact with your crush over Aunt Agnes's wimple. You raise an eyebrow. She suppresses a giggle. Aunt Agnes immediately stops spinning. "Is there a draft?" she asks suspiciously. You both freeze. The tension is palpable. It's a high-stakes game of red light, green light. But here is where things get weird. While public meetings like this are locked down tighter than a fortress, there is a quirky fringe practice in some parts of medieval and early modern Europe that completely contradicts the Aunt Agnes philosophy. It's called bundling or tarrying. Imagine this. Instead of sitting on a cold bench under the gaze of a chaperone, the suitor is invited into the girl's house at night, and they get into bed together. Wait, what? Yes, bundling was a practice where a courting couple was allowed to sleep in the same bed, often with the parents sleeping in the same room. The catch, they were fully clothed. Sometimes, to be extra safe, a bundling board was placed between them, a literal wooden plank dividing the mattress. In some extreme cases, the girl was actually tied into a sack, or the man's legs were bound. The logic behind this was surprisingly practical. Fuel and candles were expensive. It was cold outside. Why make the young couple shiver on a porch when they could talk comfortably under a quilt? It was viewed as a way to allow intimacy without danger. It prioritized thermal efficiency over moral panic. You imagine trying to propose bundling to Aunt Agnes right now. "Excuse me, Agnes, would you mind if we went to bed together with a plank of wood between us?" You decide against it. She has a very sharp spindle, and she looks ready to use it. So you are stuck with the public surveillance. You notice that your crush is using a clever workaround. She is using her fan, or perhaps just the edge of her veil, to hide her mouth from her aunt while she whispers to you, "Meet me by the well tomorrow," she breathes. Aunt Agnes whips her head around. "What was that, a fly?" "Yes, Auntie," your crush says, innocent as a lamb, "a very persistent fly." You realize that the chaperone system actually creates a unique kind of eroticism. Because you can't touch, the desire to touch becomes overwhelming. A brushed elbow feels like a lightning strike. A glimpse of an ankle is a scandal. The repression acts like a pressure cooker. If you were allowed to just make out behind the barn, you might get bored, but because Aunt Agnes is there, ensuring you can't do anything, you want to do everything. You try to impress the aunt. This is a classic strategy. If you win the chaperone, you win the girl. You ask Aunt Agnes about her spinning. You compliment the quality of the wool. She softens, just a fraction. She starts talking about the price of fleece in the next town. You feign fascination. You nod. You ask follow-up questions about carding combs. Your crush watches you with amusement. She knows what you are doing. It's a team effort now. You are distracting the guard while she studies your face, memorizing it for later. But the lack of privacy wears on you. You can't be vulnerable. You can't ask the deep questions. You are performing a play for an audience of one. The publicness of medieval life is relentless. People sleep in shared rooms, eat in shared halls, and date in shared spaces. The concept of privacy as a right, the idea that you are entitled to be alone, is a modern invention. Here, being alone is suspicious. Solitude is for hermits and witches. To be a good member of society is to be visible. There is a theory that this lack of privacy is why medieval poetry and songs are so obsessed with secrets. The secret love is the only real love because it's the only one that belongs solely to the couple. Everything else belongs to the family, the church, and the community. By whispering behind a veil, you are carving out a tiny, private kingdom right under Aunt Agnes's nose. The sun begins to dip lower. Aunt Agnes packs up her wool. "Time to go," she announces. She stands up, creating a physical wall between you and the girl. The date is over. You stand up, brushing the dust from your hose. "It was a pleasure discussing turnips," you say. "The pleasure was mine," your crush replies, with a twinkle in her eye that has nothing to do with root vegetables. As they walk away, you watch them go. You didn't get a kiss. You didn't even get to hold hands properly, but you managed to communicate. You survived the audit. Aunt Agnes didn't hit you. That counts as a success. You realize that dating with a chaperone is a test of patience. It weeds out the non-serious suitors. If you aren't willing to sit through 2 hours of silence and a lecture on wool prices, you clearly don't love her enough. It's an endurance sport. And you passed the first round. But now you need to find a way to express your feelings that goes beyond turnips. You need to give her something, a token, something she can keep, something that Aunt Agnes can't confiscate. You need to enter the complex, coded world of medieval gift-giving, where a sleeve isn't just a sleeve, and a glove is a contract. You have successfully navigated the minefield of the chaperone and established a line of communication. Now, you need to cement this fragile alliance with a physical object. In the modern world, the hierarchy of relationship gifts is fairly standard. Flowers for a first date, jewelry for an anniversary, and a shared Netflix password when things are getting serious. In the Middle Ages, however, the object you choose to give carries a weight that can be legally binding, socially dangerous, or deeply erotic, depending on whether it's made of gold, silk, or wood. You find yourself at a peddler's stall during a fair day. The table is heaped with trinkets, ribbons, pins, belts, and scraps of lace. You are looking for a token. This isn't just a souvenir. A token is a physical proxy for your affection. It is something she can keep on her person, a way for you to be close to her even when Aunt Agnes is guarding the perimeter. Your eyes land on a pile of sleeves. To a modern observer, giving someone a sleeve sounds like you ripped your shirt and are handing them the debris. But you know that in this era, sleeves are the ultimate accessory. They are not permanently sewn to the tunic or gown. They are detachable, laced onto the armhole with points. This is a brilliant design feature because the armpits are the high friction, high sweat zones of the medieval body. By having removable sleeves, you can wash the parts that need washing without soaking the heavy velvet or wool of the main garment. It also allows you to mix and match. You can wear your fancy sleeves with your work dress, but because they are detachable, they are also giftable. Giving a woman your sleeve is an intensely intimate gesture. You are giving her a piece of your clothing that has shaped itself to your arm. It's a second skin. If she accepts it, she might wear it. Imagine the visual impact. She walks into church wearing a dress of blue wool, but one of her sleeves is the dark red damask of your best doublet. Everyone who sees it knows. It is a flag of possession. She is literally wearing your colors. But maybe a sleeve is too bold for this stage. It screams, "We are practically married, and you aren't quite there yet." You look at the ribbons. Color is everything here. You have to be careful. You reach for a yellow ribbon, but then you snatch your hand back. Yellow is the color of hostility or jealousy. Giving a yellow ribbon is basically saying, "I hate you." You look at the green ones. Green is tricky. It represents youth and joy, but it also has a scandalous connotation. Green gowns refer to grass stains acquired from rolling around in the fields. It implies a love that is unofficial. Safe bet? Blue. Blue is the color of fidelity. It's the color of the Virgin Mary. It says, "My love is true and will not fade." You pick out a small strip of azure silk. It's safe, pious, and romantic. Then there is the jewelry. You look at the rings. This is the danger zone. In the Middle Ages, a ring isn't just a pretty bauble, it is a legal trigger. If you give a woman a ring and she puts it on, and there are witnesses, you might have just accidentally married her. The church courts are full of cases where a spousal was contested because a ring changed hands. "He gave me a ring with a stone in it," she argues. "It was just a loan," he counters. Historians still debate the conditional nature of these gifts. This is the scholarly friction point. If the engagement is broken, who keeps the ring? The legal records are bogged down with petty disputes over whether a silver ring was a gift of seduction, which she keeps, or a pledge of marriage, which must be returned. The law generally sided with the idea that if the man broke it off, she kept the loot. If she broke it off, she had to return it. It was an early form of emotional insurance. You see a specific type of ring that catches your eye, a gimel ring. It looks like one ring, but it splits apart into 2 or 3 interlocking hoops. During the engagement, you wear one hoop and she wears the other. On the wedding day, you put them back together on her finger to form a complete whole. It's a beautiful mechanical metaphor for 2 lives becoming one. But it's expensive. You don't have gimel ring money. You have ribbon and maybe a shiny pin money. You move to the quirky section of the stall. You see something carved out of wood. It looks like a long, flat stick, intricately decorated with hearts and geometric patterns. This is a busk, or in the Welsh tradition, related to the love spoon. A busk is a stiffener that slides into the front of a woman's bodice or stays to keep her posture upright. Think about the placement. This piece of wood, which you carved or bought, will slide down the front of her dress and rest directly against her sternum, right between her breasts, pointing towards her heart. It is the most intimate object imaginable, yet it is completely hidden from the world. It is a secret embrace that lasts all day. If you give her a busk and she wears it, she is physically carrying your support. It's a wooden hug. You decide the busk is too forward for a public exchange, and the ring is too legally binding. You settle on a pair of gloves. Gloves are the perfect middle ground. Hands are the primary point of contact in a chaste courtship. You can't kiss her lips, but you might kiss her hand. By giving her gloves, you are symbolically covering her hands, protecting them, claiming them. There is a rich tradition of glove money, or glove giving. It implies you want to keep her safe. Plus, they are often scented. Remember the smell of the street? Perfumed leather gloves are a luxury that makes life bearable. You buy the gloves. They are soft kid skin, embroidered with a tiny gold thread on the cuff. They smell of amber and rosemary. Now comes the delivery. You meet her again, perhaps by the fountain. Aunt Agnes is there, of course, scanning the horizon for moral threats. You have to be smooth. You can't just hand over a gift-wrapped box. Wrapping paper doesn't exist yet. You have to do the sleight of hand pass. You engage Aunt Agnes in conversation about the weather, a topic that never fails. Looks like rain from the west, Auntie. While she looks at the sky to verify your meteorological claim, you press the soft leather bundle into your crush's hand. She spirits it away into her own sleeve, or the pouch hanging from her belt, in a nanosecond. The transfer is complete. Later, she will inspect them in private. This is the power of the token. It prolongs the date. When she is alone in her chamber, or the corner of the room she shares with 5 siblings, she will smell the amber scent. She will trace the gold thread. It is a tangible proof that she is desired. But there is a flip side to this gift economy. It creates a debt. If she accepts the gloves, she is signaling that she is open to your suit. If she returns them, it's a rejection. But if she keeps them and wears them tucked into her belt where everyone can see, that is a public declaration. It's the medieval equivalent of changing her relationship status to "it's complicated" or "in a relationship." You watch her walk away, her hand resting on the pouch where the gloves are hidden. You feel a surge of triumph. You have successfully planted a flag in her life. You have occupied space on her person. However, tokens are just static objects. They can't talk. They can't defend you when a rival shows up, and a rival will show up. The dating market is competitive, and the ultimate way to prove your worth isn't with soft leather or silk ribbons. It's with violence, controlled, regulated, spectator sport violence. You realize that to really seal the deal, you might have to bleed a little, or at least watch someone else bleed. You look toward the lists being set up outside the town walls. The flags are snapping in the wind. The horses are snorting. It's time for the ultimate date night, the tournament. You have your gloves, you have your shared glances, and now you have arrived at the main event. If the market square was a mosh pit and the church was a library, The tournament is the Super Bowl, the Oscars, and a heavy metal concert all rolled into one. You are standing in the lists, the designated combat zone, or rather, just outside the wooden barriers that separate the violence from the spectators. This is the ultimate medieval date night. In the modern world, you might take a date to a horror movie to induce that cling to me for safety reflex. Here, the horror is real, live, and galloping towards you at 30 miles per hour. The ground literally shakes. You can feel the thud of hooves in the soles of your shoes. The air is thick with dust, horse sweat, and the metallic tang of adrenaline. You look over at your companion. Her cheeks are flushed, her eyes wide. Is she looking at you? No, she is looking at Sir Reginald, who is currently gleaming in polished steel and parading his horse sideways like a show pony. You feel a pang of jealousy. It is hard to compete with a man who is literally armor-plated and riding a beast that costs more than your entire family lineage. But you relax a little when you remember that Sir Reginald is likely sweating off 5 pounds of water weight inside that suit and can barely see out of his visor. The tournament is a strange mix of brutality and high fashion. The stands are draped in colorful tapestries. The nobility are sitting in raised boxes, wearing their best velvets. This is where the courtly love we talked about earlier gets put into practice. You see a lady lean over the railing and hand a helmeted knight a veil. He ties it to his lance. This is the favor. It's a public declaration. If he wins, he honors her. If he gets knocked into the mud, he has disgraced her laundry. Mainstream history tells us that jousting was the headline act. 2 knights, a barrier, the tilt, and a collision course. You watch as the flag drops. The noise is incredible. It's not the clank-clank of movies. It's a roaring, tearing sound of hooves tearing up the turf, followed by the sickening crack of ash wood shattering against steel. Splinters fly into the crowd. You instinctively pull your date closer to shield her. Smooth move. Smooth. But here is the thing. The joust, with its orderly lanes and one-on-one drama, is actually the safe version. It uses arms of courtesy, lances with coronal tips, shaped like little crowns, to disperse the impact rather than pierce the chest. The real chaos, and the part that the crowd secretly loves the most, is the melee. The melee is a team sport. It's essentially a riot with rules. 2 groups of knights charge each other and fight until everyone on one side is captured or unhorsed. There are no lanes. There is no polite spacing. It's a swirling vortex of maces, swords, and panicked horses. You watch a knight get clobbered from behind while distracted by a fan. It's unchivalrous, it's messy, and it's thrilling. This brings us to a scholarly debate that historians still argue over. Was the tournament actually good training for war, or was it a dangerous distraction that softened knights up? Some scholars argue that the sportification of combat, with its point systems, blunted weapons, and breaks for refreshments, made knights treat war like a game, leading to disastrous decisions on real battlefields, like the Battle of Agincourt, where French knights charged into mud because they were eager for glory. Others argue it was the only way to keep these killing machines in practice during peacetime without decimating the population. As you watch a squire run out to drag a concussed knight off the field by his ankles, you lean towards the dangerous distraction theory. The church certainly hated it. Popes frequently banned tournaments, threatening excommunication for anyone who participated. They argued it promoted the 7 deadly sins, pride, showing off, envy of the winner, wrath, hitting people, and sloth because you weren't working. Plus, if a knight died in a tournament, he was technically committing suicide by stupidity and could be denied a Christian burial. But nobody in the crowd cares about the Pope right now. They care about the drama. You spot the heralds, the medieval sports commentators. They are shouting out the names and achievements of the combatants. Here stands Sir William, who defeated the giant of Flanders. He probably didn't, but the hype is part of the show. The heralds are also the referees and the scorekeepers. They are the only ones who can tell who is who inside the tin cans. You notice a quirky fringe detail about the prizes. While we imagine the winner getting a crown or a bag of gold, tournament prizes could be weirdly specific. There are records of knights winning a falcon, a greyhound, or even a talking bear. Imagine dragging a bear home to your castle. Look, honey, I won. That's nice, dear. Does it eat peasants? But for you, down in the cheap standing room section, the tournament isn't about the bear. It's about the social license. The noise of the crowd provides a privacy shield. You can shout into your date's ear. You can share a wineskin. The collective focus is on the field, which means Aunt Agnes, if she's even here, is probably distracted by a particularly violent collision. There is also a dark eroticism to the event. The sight of physical prowess, the risk of death, the display of male strength, it's all designed to trigger biological responses. It's the bad boy appeal codified into a sporting event. You notice your date wincing as a lance shatters, but she doesn't look away. The violence validates the protective role of the partner. You aren't a knight, but you are standing next to her, solid and safe, while the rich guys give each other concussions. You also see the wild men, or performers who come out between the jousts. These are actors dressed in leaves or furs, acting like savages, sometimes swinging clubs that shoot fireworks. It's the halftime show. It adds a layer of surrealism to the day. You are eating a meat pie, watching a man in a leaf suit dance, while a duke bleeds out in the medical tent. It is a sensory overload. But as the sun begins to set, signaling the end of the games, the atmosphere shifts. The Queen of Love and Beauty is chosen to hand out the prizes. It's usually a high-ranking noblewoman. The victor limps up to the box, battered and bruised, to receive a ring or a wreath. It's the climax of the courtly love fantasy. You turn to your companion. The dust is settling. The adrenaline is fading. You have survived the excitement. But now, as you walk back towards the village, the reality of your situation crashes back in. The romance of the tournament is a fantasy. It's a game played by people who can afford armor. You, on the other hand, have to deal with the real economy of marriage. You have the girl's interest. You have the chaperone's grudging tolerance. You have the token. But you don't have the contract. And in the medieval world, love is lovely, but land is mandatory. You look at her and realize that the next step isn't a kiss. It's a business meeting. You have to sit down with her father. You have to talk about cows. You have to talk about acres. You have to talk about dowries. The fun is over. The negotiation begins. And unlike the joust, there are no blunted weapons in a dowry negotiation. The dust of the tournament has settled, the crowds have dispersed, and the adrenaline of watching Sir Reginald get concussed has faded into a dull memory. You are now entering the least romantic, yet most crucial, phase of your medieval courtship. You are walking toward the house of your beloved's father, and you are not carrying flowers. You are carrying a mental spreadsheet of every single asset you own, down to the last spoon. In the modern world, money discussions usually happen after you've moved in together, often in hushed, tense arguments over whose turn it is to pay the electric bill. In the Middle Ages, the financial audit comes first. Before you can hold her hand in public without Aunt Agnes hyperventilating, you have to prove that you are a solvent economic entity. You are not just a lover, you are a small business looking for a merger. You step into the father's house. It's smoky, dark, and smells of cabbage and judgment. Her father sits at the head of the trestle table. He is a man who knows the exact value of a bushel of oats and isn't afraid to haggle over it. He gestures for you to sit. There is no small talk. He doesn't ask about your hobbies or your dreams. He wants to know about your livestock. I have 3 cows, you start, trying to sound like a cattle baron. 3, he grunts. Are they good milkers, or are they the scrawny ones that eat thistles and complain? 2 are excellent. You lie slightly. 1 is spirited. This is the dance of the dowry and the dower. It is a high-stakes negotiation where 2 families try to ensure that the new household won't collapse into starvation by next winter. Let's clarify the terms, because the terminology is legally binding. The dowry, or maritagium, is what the bride brings to the marriage. It is the contribution from her family to set up the new home. It might be a plot of land, a sum of money, a collection of linens or livestock. It is essentially the startup capital for your joint venture. The mainstream historical fact here is that the dowry wasn't just a price to get rid of a daughter, as pop culture often depicts. It was legally hers. It was meant to support her and her children. If you, the husband, turn out to be a gambling drunkard who wastes the family fortune, the law and her angry brothers would often step in to try and protect the dowry. It was a safety net. On the flip side, you have to provide the dower. This is what you promise to give her if you die first. Given the life expectancy, the wars, and the general lack of workplace safety standards, you dying first is a very statistically probable scenario. The dower is her pension plan. Usually, it's a promise of 1/3 of your land for her use during her widowhood. So, you sit there, sweating in your wool tunic, as her father interrogates you about your land. Do you own the freehold, or are you a tenant? If you are a tenant, what kind of rent do you pay? This brings us to a quirky, fringe detail of medieval property law: peppercorn rents, or rose rents. Sometimes, if a tenant was on very good terms with the landlord, or if the land was a gift, the rent was symbolic. You might find yourself explaining that you owe the local lord 1 red rose at midsummer, or 1 pound of cumin per year. It sounds poetic to us, paying your rent with a flower, but to the father, it's a serious legal distinction. It means you have secure tenure. If you had to pay labor service, working the Lord's fields for free 3 days a week, that would be a deal breaker. He doesn't want his daughter marrying a guy who is too busy harvesting the Lord's wheat to grow his own turnips. The father leans forward. My daughter, he says, is a hard worker. She can spin, she can brew, and she has all her teeth. She comes with 2 sheep, a feather bed, and a brass pot. You try not to look too excited about the brass pot, but that is a major score. Metal cookware is expensive. A good pot can last 3 generations. This is the medieval equivalent of her coming with a fully paid off Toyota Camry. I offer, you counter, a cottage with a sound roof, 6 acres of arable land in the West Field, and the rights to pannage in the woods. Pannage is the right to let your pigs eat acorns in the forest. It's a big deal in the pork economy. Historians still argue vigorously about the nature of these transactions. Was this system a purchase of women that reduced them to chattel? Or was it actually a form of pre-mortem inheritance that empowered women? Some scholars argue that the dowry was the one time a woman received a chunk of the family wealth directly, giving her agency and leverage within the marriage. If you mistreated her, she could theoretically threaten to take her brass pot and go home. The power of the purse was real, even if the legal structures were patriarchal. The father scratches his beard. He is doing the math. 6 acres plus her 2 sheep. It's a viable farm, but he pushes for more. He wants to know about the morning gift. This is a gift given by the husband to the bride on the morning after the wedding. It's personal property, hers to keep, separate from the household budget. I have a silver brooch, you offer. It's the one you inherited from your grandmother. It's small, but it's silver. The father nods. Acceptable. The tension in the room breaks. You haven't discussed love. You haven't discussed compatibility. You have discussed pigs, pots, and acorns. But in doing so, you have demonstrated something more important to the medieval mind: responsibility. You have shown that you take the survival of his daughter seriously. You aren't just a dreamer writing poems. You are a provider who understands the value of a roof. Now, how do you seal this deal? You probably can't write a contract. Parchment is for the rich. Instead, you might use a tally stick. This is a fascinating piece of medieval financial technology. You take a hazel stick, you carve notches into it, representing the value of the dowry and dower. Then, you split the stick down the middle, lengthwise. You keep one half, the father keeps the other. Because of the unique grain of the wood, the 2 halves can only fit perfectly back together with each other. It is an unforgeable receipt. If the father later claims you promised 4 cows instead of 3, you bring out your half of the stick, match it to his, and count the notches. It is blockchain made of twigs. You watch the father pull out a knife and a stick. He carves the notches. Snick, snick, snick. 2 sheep. Snick. 1 brass pot. Snick. 6 acres. He splits the wood with a sharp crack. He hands you your half. You tuck it into your belt. It weighs nothing, but it feels heavier than a sword. This stick is your future. It binds you to a woman, a family, and a piece of land. There is a moment of quiet acknowledgement. The father pours 2 cups of ale. This is the god's penny, or Arl's penny, a small sum of money or a drink given to bind a bargain. You drink. The ale is sour, but it tastes like victory. You realize that this transactional approach strips away the ambiguity of modern dating. There is no "where is this going" conversation. You know exactly where it is going: to the church, then to the farm, then to the grave. It is brutal in its clarity, but there is a comfort in it too. You aren't stepping into the unknown. You are stepping into a structure that has supported your ancestors for centuries. You stand up to leave. The father walks you to the door. For the first time, he smiles. It's a grim, tight smile, but it's there. She eats a lot of bread, he warns you, but she bakes a good loaf. Okay. I have plenty of flour, you reply. It's the most romantic thing you've said all day. You walk back out into the night air. You have the assets. You have the permission, you have the stick, the business merger is approved. Now, you have to move to the public declaration. You have to stand up in front of God and the neighbors and make the promise official. But in the Middle Ages, the line between engaged and married is incredibly blurry, and the next step, hand fasting, is a legal minefield that confuses even the priests. You step out of the dark, smoky negotiation room of the Father's house and into the bright, crisp air of a Sunday morning. You have the deal. You have here the tally stick. But in the eyes of God and the parish council, you are still technically single. It is time to change that. It is time for the hand fasting. You might assume that you are heading straight to the altar, surrounded by stained glass and incense, to say, I do. But that is a modern assumption. In the medieval village, the most important part of the wedding doesn't happen inside the church. It happens at the church, specifically at the church porch. You stand there now, under the stone archway. This is a liminal space, a threshold between the sacred world inside and the secular world of the market square outside. It is the designated zone for business, for settling debts, and for making the most binding contract of your life. Your neighbors are gathering. They aren't just guests, they are witnesses. In a world without digital databases, the memory of the crowd is the only record that matters. You face your betrothed. She looks different today. She is wearing her best kirtle, perhaps the blue one you sent the ribbon for, and her hair is braided with fresh flowers. The air smells of rain and damp stone. The priest stands between you, but strangely, his role here is secondary. He isn't marrying you in the way a modern officiant does. He is just there to make sure you don't mess up the grammar. This brings us to the most terrifying linguistic trap in history, the difference between verba de futuro and verba de presenti. It sounds like a boring Latin lesson, but your entire future depends on it. If you say, I will take you as my wife, that is verba de futuro. It's a promise. It's a betrothal. It means I plan to marry you eventually, unless something better comes along or I die of the flux. It is a strong contract, but it can be broken. However, if you say, I take you as my wife, present tense, that is verba de presenti. Boom, you are married, instantly, irrevocably. It doesn't matter if you haven't had the feast yet. It doesn't matter if you haven't slept together. The moment those words leave your lips in the present tense, the sacrament is complete. There is no divorce. You are locked in until death. Historians still argue about the chaos this theological technicality caused, because the church taught that marriage was created by the consent of the couple, not by the priest or the parents. Thousands of people accidentally married themselves in secret. A couple whispering, I take you, behind a haystack were, in the eyes of God and canon law, just as married as a king and queen in a cathedral. This led to centuries of court cases where one person claimed, we are married, and the other claimed, no, I just said I might marry you. The ecclesiastical courts were essentially the Judge Judy of bad grammar disputes. But you are doing this the solemn way. You reach out and take her hand. This is the hand fasting, the physical joining. In some traditions, the priest wraps your joined hands in a stole or a piece of cloth, literally tying the knot. The origin of that phrase is right here, in the pressure of her palm against yours, bound by fabric. You speak the words. You are careful to use the present tense. I take thee, name, to my wedded wife. She repeats the formula, I take thee to my wedded husband. There is a collective exhale from the crowd. The deed is done. You have plighted your troth. Troth means truth or faith. You have pledged your truth to her. It is a heavy word, tasting of Old English and iron. But you aren't done yet. Before you can have the party, you have to survive the audit. This is the reading of the banns. For the next 3 Sundays, the priest will stand up in the pulpit and shout your names to the entire parish. I publish the banns of marriage between your name and her name. If any of you know cause or just impediment why these two should not be joined together, ye are to declare it. This is the medieval background check. It is designed to stop bigamy, incest, and fraud. You have to sit in the pew, sweating, while the priest practically dares the village to ruin your life. You look around the congregation. Is there an old flame who might hold a grudge? Is there a distant cousin who knows a secret about your grandfather's lineage that makes you technically related to your bride within the forbidden degrees? The church's rules on incest are confusingly broad. At one point, you couldn't marry anyone related to you within 7 degrees. That basically ruled out everyone in your village and half the people in the next county. Later, they relaxed it to 4 degrees. But still, the fear is real. If someone stands up and shouts, "Objection," the wedding stops. An investigation begins. This creates a market for clandestine marriages. This is the quirky, fringe underbelly of the wedding industry. If you want to skip the banns, maybe because your parents hate her, or you are technically cousins, or you just can't wait 3 weeks, you can find a hedge priest. These are itinerant, sometimes defrocked clergy who will marry you in a tavern, a field, or under a tree, the hedge, for a few coins. They skip the banns, mumble the Latin, and pronounce you man and wife. It's illicit, it's frowned upon, and it carries a heavy fine if you get caught, but it is valid. It's the medieval equivalent of a drive-through chapel in Las Vegas. But you are a respectable person with a dowry stick and a reputation. You endure the 3 weeks of banns. Sunday 1, silence. Sunday 2, silence. Sunday 3, a moment of panic when old Miller John coughs loudly, but he's just clearing his throat. Silence. You are clear. Back at the church porch on the final day, there is one last ritual exchange. You produce the ring, or, if you are poorer, you might break a coin in half, gold or silver. You give her one half, you keep the other. It's a physical token of the contract. You place the ring on her hand, but you don't just slide it onto the ring finger immediately. You perform a little theological journey across her hand. You touch the ring to her thumb in the name of the Father. You move to the index finger and of the Son. You move to the middle finger and of the Holy Ghost. Finally, you slide it onto the 4th finger. Amen. Why the 4th finger? The medievals believed in the vena amoris, the vein of love, which supposedly ran directly from that finger to the heart. Anatomically, it's nonsense, but symbolically, it's perfect. You are physically connecting the gold band to the pump that keeps her alive. The priest blesses the ring with holy water, likely sprinkling a bit on you both for good measure. The serious legal part is over. The spousals are complete. You are now a single legal entity. Her debts are your debts. Your land is her dower. The mood shifts instantly. The solemnity of the porch evaporates. The priest smiles. The fiddler, who has been waiting impatiently by the graveyard, strikes up a tune. The doors of the church swing open, not for you to go in for a quiet prayer, but to signal the start of the nuptial mass, which is really just the spiritual garnish on the legal dish you just served. But let's be honest, nobody is thinking about the mass right now. They are thinking about the bride ale, the wedding reception, the procession forms. You and your new wife are at the front. Behind you, the whole village falls in line. There is shouting, laughter, and the ringing of bells. You look at your hands. They feel different. You look at the tally stick in your belt. It feels secure. You look at your wife. She is smiling, a genuine, relieved smile. You have navigated the mud, the class system, the toxic makeup, the calendar of forbidden days, the chaperone, and the grammar trap. You have made it to the finish line of the courtship. But the day isn't over. In fact, for the community, the real entertainment is just beginning. The wedding feast is a test of endurance, digestion, and social standing. And at the end of it lies the most public, intrusive, and bizarre ritual of all, the bedding ceremony. You are standing in the center of the village hall, or perhaps a large barn borrowed for the occasion, and your head is spinning. It's not just the strong ale or the heat of the fire. It's the sheer sonic force of the bride ale. The wedding feast is in full swing. You have eaten your weight in roasted meat. You have watched your uncle try to dance a jig and fall into a bench. You have accepted the congratulations of neighbors who haven't spoken to you in 3 years, but are suddenly your best friends because you provided free booze. But as the candles burn low and the shadows stretch across the rush-strewn floor, a shift occurs in the room. The music changes from a dance beat to something more rhythmic, almost marching. The older women start whispering to the bride. The men start clapping you on the shoulder with a little too much force. It is time. In the modern world, the newlyweds drive away in a car with tin cans tied to the bumper, heading for a private hotel room. In the Middle Ages, there is no away. There is only upstairs or the other room, and you are absolutely not going there alone. You are about to endure the bedding ceremony. This is the moment where the community escorts you to the marital bed to officially put you to bed. It sounds like something you do for a toddler, but here it is a legal necessity. You see, a marriage unconsummated is a marriage that can be annulled. If you wake up tomorrow and decide you made a terrible mistake, but you haven't sealed the deal, the church can dissolve the union. The community, therefore, wants proof. They want to witness you getting into that bed, so that if anyone challenges the marriage later, 50 people can stand up in court and say, "I saw them get under the covers." You are swept up in a tide of people. It's a raucous procession. The fiddler leads the way, playing a bawdy tune. The bride is surrounded by her bridesmaids, giggling and weeping. You are surrounded by your groomsmen, a term that originally meant the men who literally guarded your room, who are currently making jokes that would make a sailor blush. You arrive at the bridal chamber. It's the best room in the house, or the only room in the house, divided by a curtain. The bed itself is the star of the show. In medieval inventories, the bed is often the most expensive item a family owns, worth more than the cottage itself. It is a massive piece of furniture, piled high with feather ticks, wool blankets, and the finest linen sheets the dowry could provide. Now comes the undressing. Isn't a private, romantic reveal. It is a spectator sport. The bridesmaids undress the bride. The groomsmen undress you. It is chaotic. There is a tradition of snatching the ribbons. The young men try to grab the bride's garters or the ribbons from her dress as trophies. It's a scuffle, a physical manifestation of the community tearing away your old identity as a single person. You stand there, shivering slightly in your linen undertunic, or less, depending on how rowdy your friends are. The bride is in her shift. The air is thick with the smell of sweat, lavender, and the smoke from the tallow candles held by the guests who have crammed themselves into the room. Before you can get in, the priest pushes his way to the front. He isn't done with you yet. He has a holy water sprinkler, an aspergillum, and a book. He proceeds to bless the bed. This is serious business. He sprinkles holy water on the mattress, the pillows, and the sheets. He prays that the bed will be a place of peace, not discord, and, crucially, that it will be fertile. There is a quirky fringe belief that demons and malevolent spirits love to hide in unblessed mattresses to cause impotence or barrenness. The priest is essentially performing a tactical exorcism of the furniture. He chants, "Bless, O Lord, this chamber and all who dwell in it," while your drunk cousin tries to catch the holy water in his mouth. Once the bed is sanctified, you are ordered to climb in. You scoot over. The bride climbs in. You sit there, propped up against the pillows, wearing your nightcaps, because drafts are deadly, obviously, looking out at a sea of faces. It is the most awkward audience you have ever had. But they aren't leaving yet. First, you have to drink the benediction posset. This is a warm drink made of milk, wine, spices, and sometimes eggs. It is a calorie bomb designed to give you strength for the night ahead. The cup is passed around. You drink, she drinks. It's a communal communion of dairy and alcohol. Then comes the game. It's called throwing the stocking. The guests sit at the foot of the bed. One by one, they take the bride's stockings, which were removed earlier, and throw them over their shoulders, aiming for you. If a stocking lands on the groom's nose, the thrower will be the next to marry. It's like catching the bouquet, but with used socks and poor aim. You dodge a flying woolen hose. Everyone cheers. Historians still argue about how invasive this ceremony really was. In royal weddings, we know it was incredibly public. Ambassadors would literally watch the king and queen get under the covers to report back to their home countries that the alliance was valid. For peasants, it was likely rowdy, but less political. The debate centers on when the crowd actually left. Did they stay until the act was done? Generally, no. That's a myth, mostly. The goal was to see the couple established in bed, legally together. Once the curtains were drawn, the witnessing was considered complete. However, there was often rough music or charivari outside the window. The guests might leave the room, but they would bang pots and sing songs outside the house for an hour, just to remind you they were there. It was a way of policing the boundaries of the marriage, a reminder that you belong to the village as much as you belong to each other. The priest gives a final blessing. The parents take a last look, their faces a mix of relief, the dowry is settled, and sadness, the nest is empty. And then, finally, mercifully, someone starts shooing people out. Out! Out with you all, the father bellows. The candles are extinguished one by one until only a single taper is left burning on the bedside chest. The noise recedes, the door creaks shut. You hear the heavy wooden bar slide into place, the lock clicks. For the first time in your entire life, for the first time since you were born in a crowded room, raised in a crowded cottage, and worked in a crowded field, you are alone. Well, almost alone. You turn to look at the person next to you. The adrenaline of the day begins to drain away, leaving a heavy, bone-deep exhaustion. The silence in the room is sudden and ringing. You can hear the settling of the thatch roof. You can hear the wind outside, the same wind that blew through the harvest fields. You are no longer a suitor. You are no longer a negotiator. You are a husband. She is a wife. The wooden tally stick is on the table. The gloves are in the chest. The ribbons are gone. The performance is over. You blow out the final candle. The darkness is total, wrapped in the smell of the blessed herbs and the warmth of the wool. You pull the quilt up. The chaos of the medieval world, the mud, the laws, the bells, the shouting is walled out. Here, in the dark, there is no class system. There is no chaperone. There is just the quiet, steady rhythm of two people breathing in the safety of a locked room. And so, the door is barred and the world is shut away. The festivities have faded into the distance, leaving only the soft, comforting hum of the night. You let your head sink deep into the pillow, feeling the weight of the day simply dissolve into the mattress. Think back on the journey you have taken. You navigated the muddy streets and the sharp smells of the market. You survived the complex maze of social rules and the stern gaze of the chaperone. You worried about dowries and tally sticks, ribbons and rings. You stood before the village and made your promises. It was a long, arduous road, filled with noise and negotiation. But all of that is behind you now. The transaction is complete. The anxiety of the what if has been replaced by the certainty of the what is. You are safe. The stone walls of the house are thick, holding the warmth of the hearth. The roof is sound. The harvest is in. Listen to the silence. It is a rare and precious thing in a world so full of bustle. It wraps around you like a heavy, soft blanket. There is nothing more you need to do. No more impressing, no more striving, no more explaining. You can simply be. Let your breathing slow down to match the quiet rhythm of the room, in and out. The fire in the hearth has burned down to glowing embers, casting a faint, warm light that pulses gently in the dark. It is a hypnotic, sleepy light. Your eyelids feel heavy, so wonderfully heavy. The stiffness of the tunic, the pinch of the shoes, the scratch of the wool, it's all gone. You are floating in a space of pure rest. The history, with all its strangeness and struggle, fades into a story told a long time ago. Now, there is only the present moment, drifting softly into the past. You are warm, you are secure, you are at peace.